Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jeevanam Kavibiriditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimada-tatam Bhuvi Grananti Ye Bhurida Janaha Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jeevanam Kavibiriditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimada-tatam Bhuvi Grananti Ye Bhurida Janaha Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jeevanam Kavibiriditam Kalmashapaham. So today we are celebrating the 187th birthday of Sri Ramakrishna, though the birthday was celebrated on Friday. But since many people were not able to, were not in a position to attend the online spiritual retreat on a weekday, we organized it today. And from 2:30 onwards, we had a beautiful spiritual retreat where two Swamis spoke on different aspects of Sri Ramakrishna, his life and his message. And the topic which Swami Satyeshanandji covered today in the spiritual retreat, the first topic, which followed a few songs on Sri Ramakrishna and by Sri Ramakrishna, sung by Dattatreya Velankar. So Swami Satyeshanandji explained in his talk on living a God-centered life, Sri Ramakrishna and Sri Ramakrishna's message, and how to lead a God-centered life while being in the world. So people normally think to lead a God-centered life, you have to embrace monasticism or maybe live a life which is not very much compatible with the life in the world. So that is the popular idea, and most of the religions of the world, though they emphasize vairagya, emphasize a kind of renunciation if one has to practice spirituality. They insist on giving up the world, at least mentally, if not physically. So what conduces to God realization, and especially if a person is following a particular profession, he's living in the world, does that mean that he doesn't have any hope? Can he not aspire for realizing God? So that was the theme on which Swami Satyeshanandji spoke. I think most of you attended the talk, so I'm not repeating the ideas that he repeated. And the second talk was on Sri Ramakrishna, the great spiritual educator of the world. Now we have in our Wednesday class, in which we deal with the philosophy of Vedanta and the science of human possibilities, we discuss a similar theme. Is our education complete if we explore all the possibilities of skill development, career development, professional career development, and lead a comparatively successful life in the world? Does it exhaust all the possibilities, all the human possibilities? So all the great spiritual masters of the past, of the present, and even of the future, they will say that unless all the possibilities, human possibilities are exhausted, human mind will, or a human being will not get true fulfillment. There are physical possibilities, as we all know. We want to develop a strong body which can withstand the strain and struggle that we have to encounter in our day-to-day life in the world. There are mental possibilities, where we skill ourselves, where we undergo academic education, and then prepare ourselves for a life in the world which may be said to be comfortable, a career-oriented life where we take so much of care to develop ourselves intellectually through education, through secular education, through development of certain skills which will enable us to lead a comfortable life. That is the second possibility, the mental possibility. Then we have slightly higher possibilities, the aesthetic possibility. the possibilities or the capacity of the human being to enjoy higher forms of life. That is, the aesthetic abilities to listen to good music, to do some painting, some creative art, performing arts or fine arts. Thus, he increases his possibility. He doesn't consider just living a life supplying the needs of the physical body, supplying the needs of the mental aspect of our personality. They are not just satisfied with that. They want to satisfy the feelings, the heart that is uh, within us, the faculty of sensitivity, of emotions, which are fulfilled only when we become creative in our approach to the world that we live in. Is it just for earning some money, building a house, and one fine day dying? No, there are other sensibilities which humankind has explored, and that has led to a lot of things which we known as fine arts. We call it fine arts because they are more subtle than the gross habits or the gross career that we undergo. We also want some kind of mountaineering or some hobby which satisfies our heart, gives us true satisfaction. So that is the third or a higher level of possibility which we explore. But what about the other faculties, like peace of mind, like loneliness, peacelessness that we experience in spite of having our physical needs fulfilled, our mental needs fulfilled, apparently a very successful or at least a career which will enable us to have some kind of security. Even after that, or even after pursuing certain hobbies like fine arts and other things, still, where does that restlessness or the peacelessness come to a human being? So, are there higher possibilities which we can explore, which will enable us to live a life, a complete life, which will give us fulfillment? So, that is the topic that we normally discuss on Wednesday, Vedanta and the science of human possibilities. Now, that kind of education was what Swami Muktidanandji, after Satyeshanji, he spoke, and he spoke of Sri Ramakrishna as the spiritual educator of mankind. His life was a wonderful life. Perhaps from the point of view of our worldly prospects, he did not live a life which would enable him to be successful in the material sense, in the sense which we understand. When you ask somebody, some parents of children, where if you ask them, for them success means embarking on a career that will fulfill their material needs as far as possible, sometimes even with lot of luxury. People don't get satisfied because our needs can be satisfied, our greed cannot be satisfied. So there are various opinions how much you really need to live a decent gross life in this world. So when you say success, it means different things to different people. For some, just earning money is success, and whether he uses it or not, or whether he is able to use it during his lifetime or not, hoarding money or collecting money, becoming rich, and a rat race for gathering as much wealth as possible is the goal. So for them, success means to be more and more wealthy as far as possible, become more wealthy by whatever means possible, sometimes even resorting to evil means. But is that the goal of life? Some people, after fulfilling that, they just have introspect and then try to find out if there are higher possibilities which will make us happy. Having enough wealth, they shift their focus. They go after intellectual pursuits. They go after fine arts, which satisfies the creative need which is within us. So we find most of these psychologists, they speak of these different needs, a hierarchy of needs, a hierarchy of satisfaction. So some people may be satisfied with good food, good house, and all the material pleasures. He may be happy, but some people, they have higher needs. Their hierarchy of needs, Abraham Maslow, he spoke of the hierarchy of needs. He said, a person will never become happy till all the needs in that ladder, in that hierarchy of needs are fulfilled. His physical needs may be fulfilled, his mental needs may be fulfilled, his emotional needs may be fulfilled. By hard work, he may fulfill that, but still, why does a little dissatisfaction with life still remain? The kind of loneliness people feel when they grow up, when they have enough wealth, they have almost everything that they need to survive decently, very decently. And they have all the good health and all the things. If a person is very lucky, he may have all these things, his physical, mental, and emotional needs fulfilled, but still he feels some kind of emptiness. So Sri Ramakrishna chose that kind of education which will fulfill that need also. So he decided that the priority of life should be to realize the true nature of ourselves. Unless we reach our true nature, which according to Vedanta is of the nature of Sat, Chit and Ananda, the immortal bliss which is within, the true man, not the apparent man, the real man which is within us, realizing whom alone one becomes totally fulfilled. So his education, Sri Ramakrishna bothered for that education, which will give him which will allow him to explore the highest possibility to know our real self. That is what Vedanta says. No matter how many needs you fulfill, the gross needs, the mental needs, but still there is some kind of emptiness in man. And that goes only when he fulfills the highest need, to know what he really is, his existential need. As Jean-Paul Sartre, he is a famous philosopher, he says, he developed that philosophy of existentialism. What are the basic problems of existence? What are the basic, existential fears? How can one get rid of existential fears? What are those existential fears? The fear of death. That is one thing which comes to our mind. No matter how successful, how rich, or how powerful a person is, nobody can say that he has removed from his psyche or from his personality the fear of death. Sooner or later, a day will come when he realizes that he has to face the inevitable, and death is following him like a shadow. We want life, but we want eternal existence, Sat. That is why Vedanta says, you want eternal existence, but you are trying to find it in the wrong place. If you think your body will last forever, you will exist forever, but the body doesn't last. Maybe 100 years is the maximum, or maybe a few years you can add to that, provided you are very lucky. But still, it has to come to an end. Even in the subtle world of religion, where they promise you heaven and hell and all those things, if you do misdeeds or evil deeds, you'll go to hell. But suppose you do good deeds and generate a lot of merit, and you go to a heaven, Vedanta says the heaven cannot be eternal. It has to terminate one day. So his hierarchy of needs forces him, I want something more tangible. I've been to heaven, I've done with that. So that is why going to heaven is not the highest goal of Vedanta. So what do you mean by God realization, or what do you mean by total freedom? That is the question Sri Ramakrishna asked, and that's the true purpose of education. According to him, education is that when he was asked by his brother to help him in some kind of priestcraft, because that was the profession, his brother and his family, they were priests who would do some rituals for a living. In India in those days, when Sri Ramakrishna was young, his father died and his brother said, I am going to Calcutta, and how will you earn a living if you didn't go to school? But at least learn some priestcraft from me. So by doing these rituals, you can at least earn a living. So that was the kind of education Ram Kumar, his elder brother, wanted him to have. He said, okay, you don't go to school, you will not pursue a career, I understand. But come with me, come to Calcutta. He reluctantly agrees. He goes to Dakshineshwar. His brother is a priest. He said, just come and help me see how I do all the daily worship for which he was paid. Someday you have to do it, otherwise, how will you survive in this world? But Sri Ramakrishna did not like that idea to be a slave. He wanted total freedom. He wanted to know what God realization is. The realization of which will give him total freedom, complete freedom from bondage, which is the goal of true religion, whether it can be any religion. Every religion speaks of total freedom, physical freedom, mental freedom, emotional freedom, and even freedom from all the so-called heavens, because even that comes to an end. Freedom from fear, freedom from for the fear of death, to reach immortality. So we heard that from Swami Muktidanandji, was the second speaker today in our retreat, where he spoke of this spiritual freedom, the true goal of life. That when we explore the human possibilities, when all our fears are gone, that is why in the Upanishads, in the Vedanta, God has been described as fearlessness itself. If you want fearlessness, you have to be free. Freedom from fear is the root cause of all our lower fears. Fear of losing wealth, fear of losing health, all these things, these existential fears, have their root cause in the fear of death, because we think we are a body, we are a mind, and that causes all the problems. And these problems were solved by the great prophets, whether it was Buddha, whether it was Christ. They spoke of the eternal nature. When you say salvation, when you talk about moksha, when you talk about mukti, when you talk about nirvana in Buddhism, and whatever name you may give, the idea is that till you realize that you are that immortal, eternal spirit, a man can never be satisfied. That is the greatest discovery humankind has made. And when we reach that state, then you can say you have reached, you have completed, your education is complete. So Sri Ramakrishna, even when he was being forced by his brother to go to school to learn at least some priestcraft, he says, I don't care for an education which will give me bread and butter. I want that education which will make me free, which will help me to realize that truth, that Godhood, which will remove all the wants. Education will remove some physical wants, still some mental wants also may be fulfilled if you have job satisfaction, or maybe your emotional needs also may be fulfilled if you have a job after your heart. Very often people have, the job that they do is not after their heart. They want to do something else, but circumstances force them to look for employment elsewhere. Say somebody is interested in music, he wants to make music his career, but he sees that perhaps that may not help me in my other needs, it may not give me money, so he changes. So his physical needs and mental needs are partly satisfied, but his emotional needs are not satisfied, because he has chosen a career or a profession out of compulsion rather than choice. He has no choice. He is being forced by circumstances. So that kind of bondage suffocates people, and that suffocation leads to a desire for true education. So Sri Ramakrishna understood this. If we observe his life right from childhood, when everybody was running after careers, he said, I'm not going to have this kind of education. In fact, Swami Vivekananda said he was spared the troubles or the ordeal of getting educated in a university or a school, because his teacher was nature, mother, or Prakriti as he called her. He used to call her mother. What is mother? Mother is nothing but the nature around us. Nature itself can be a great teacher. But unfortunately, most of us do not train our children to learn things from nature. They're learning things from dead books or dead materials, which have a tendency to make them lesser and lesser creative. Creativity comes, as Swami Vivekananda explained, the true purpose of education is to explore the creative abilities of a person, and that comes only when you are in contact with nature. Nature is a great teacher. So Swami Vivekananda, speaking about his guru Sri Ramakrishna, he said he went, his education was in direct contact with nature. That is it, that is why it was refreshingly original. He did not believe in learning second-hand information given by some professors or some books. That is, Swami Vivekananda said, we people think we are educated, but we are just remembering, or we are just reproducing what other people have thought. And then maybe we get a degree or a PhD in that kind of education. And we think we are great. We have just reproduced, or maybe some of them have added certain things, value to that education and done some creative work. But how many of us, most of us learn skills, our idea of education is to remember what others have taught. So Swami Vivekananda calls such an education a second-hand education. Education which somebody else has acquired and we just remember it, appear for some exams and either pass or fail. Even second-hand education people can't pass. But Sri Ramakrishna, he says, was never satisfied. He went to nature directly with a fresh mind, with a pure mind, and he wanted to know the truth as it is, not as told by somebody, some professor who gives. So this wonderful idea of education makes him the greatest spiritual educator of mankind. These are not my words. This is what Swami Vivekananda said. He said, I wish, like my great master, I had never been to the university, because I found it so difficult to unlearn what I learned, to unlearn the wrong things and to learn the right things. But Sri Ramakrishna was spared that trouble because he went to the mother, whom we call as Prakriti. Nature is always considered to be feminine in our Indian culture. She is the Shakti, or she is also known as Prakriti, or also known as Mother, the Divine Mother. So the Divine Mother who creates this universe, who is the creatress. Prakriti, when everywhere in nature you will find the great creator, the great Divine Mother creating. That is the idea behind the tantras and the other philosophies, or the philosophy of Shakti as it is understood, which is definitely derived from Vedanta. Vedanta calls it Maya or Prakriti, but the same thing. So Sri Ramakrishna, in the second talk, we heard, or we saw, that Swami Muktidananji was speaking of spiritual education, and Sri Ramakrishna is the true spiritual educator of mankind. So those two topics we heard today, and that gives us a fresh insight into the life and message of Sri Ramakrishna. Today, on his 187th birthday, we are celebrating. It's hardly 187 years compared to the, if you see historically, most of the prophets and the great teachers, to understand their message, it took several years. For example, the great Buddha, 500 years after he passed away, his teachings were compiled into this famous council which was held, because they thought that if Buddha's teachings are not compiled now, then there will be many teachings which have been diluted and people will send the wrong message and pass it on as the teachings of Buddha. So after 500 years, after his passing away, when the tradition was continuing through his disciples, but still through his monastery, through his Sangha, they made an attempt to say, now we have to gather all the scholars and finalize what did Buddha really say. But fortunately for us, Sri Ramakrishna, his words, his teachings, his life, they were recorded even while he was alive. Not after 500 years, when people would have, memory would have been faded, and then many things which were not said by Buddha would have been included. So it was a very difficult task to compile the Dhammapada, as it is known, to get an idea of what did Buddha really say. Even if you see the Bible, the four Gospels according to Saint Luke, the Gospel according to Saint John, you see there is some minor variation. Though they are all met Sri Ramakrishna, some of them, obviously, whatever you find in the Bible, these were wonderful truths heard by these great saints. But still, human memory, sometimes you cannot totally depend. And then when the priests or when the next generation interprets these teachings, they get diluted. So in India, they believe that the Vedas or the Shastras are so sacred. They are sacred because they have to come down in an oral tradition. They were afraid that if it is not reproduced verbatim, if you write it down, some people may manipulate it and the original teachings of the Vedas will be lost. So they maintained, they were so strict that it has to come down in a tradition. And though it involved terrible effort, great effort to remember all the four Vedas, of course, many Vedic verses are lost. But our scriptures, the scriptures of Hinduism, were preserved through an oral tradition, which they found it not only preserves teachings in a better way, because you have to memorize it. If you write the teachings in a book, it is likely to be lost. It is not in your mind, because what you write, you bring it out from the mind, you write it, and then the book can be tampered with. But if it is part of your memory, the oral tradition was given so much of importance. That is why our scriptures were known as Shruti. So reading and writing, people were discouraged from reading. Now, of course, we have the Vedas written in book form. But if you see Sri Ramakrishna's life, Swami Vivekananda says in one place, he discarded external learning. Not that he could not have gone to school, he could have gone to school. Many of his classmates, younger companions, they went to school. Some of them learned Shastras, they got jobs, they went to Calcutta. Why did Sri Ramakrishna discard external learning? This question was asked by Swami Vivekananda. Why did he choose not to go to school? Because according to the Vedantic tradition, the formal learning as it was introduced by Macaulay was not an oral kind of system of learning, nor was it a learning based on experience. It was based on rote learning. It's rote learning where books, you have to read certain things, remember certain things, reproduce it in an examination. The system of examination as it was practiced when Sri Ramakrishna in 1836, when he was born, in that very same year, Lord Macaulay, who decided that unless we change the system of education in India, we cannot rule over India. We cannot rule because their ideas are so strong. The system of education had so much of vitality. So the best way to enslave or to colonize another race is to take hold of their system of education. So when you change the system of education to suit their own needs, the colonial needs, how to reduce these people, remove the vitality from the core of education. That spiritual education which formed the core of Indian culture, Indian civilization, which enabled it to survive for so many 5,000 years, like the ancient Chinese civilization. That structure was crumbled, that structure broke down because a new education policy or a system was introduced forcibly by the colonial powers who wanted to politically dominate another nation. When this colonial ideas or the colonization took place everywhere, every country practically of Europe in those days were very keen to colonize other people, other nations. So the colonial powers decided that if you change the system of education, which is inherent to a particular country, which gives it life, which gives it vitality, and convert it to your system of education, then it's easier to control the people, the younger generation who later on became youth. So Swami Vivekananda also was a product of Western education, which was different from the ancient system of education. The true spiritual core of whose the spiritual core was intact in the Indian system. They had secular education, they had all sorts of skills, everything was there, but everything was secondary, and the spiritual core was the most important thing. That which would educate a person fully, remove all his needs, physical needs, mental needs, emotional needs, and also solve the problem of existence, of fear of death, all those things, that immortality, that education which trains a person towards freedom, towards true spiritual freedom. So that was the system of education which was destroyed, and as a result, the disciples who came to Sri Ramakrishna were educated in this modern system, which was introduced. It was introduced long ago, but Macaulay made it past a law, and slowly the old type of schools were dismantled, which had served India for thousands of years, and a new education system was created, which is unfortunately continuing even today. Not that after India became independent, we gave up that system of education. No, we had a chance. I mean, the Indian subcontinent, that is what Swami Vivekananda said, Sri Ramakrishna came to demonstrate that the spiritual education is the highest form of education, and all other education will be worthless if you are first not given the core values of life, which will enable you to lead a life of total fulfillment. We have the four values: dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. But the core value is always moksha. That spiritual freedom is the main goal. There may be intermediate goal. You have artha, you earn money. You have kama, you fulfill your small desires. But see that you don't do it by immoral means. So dharma is required. After fulfilling your basic needs, and needs to whatever extent you want to, after that you have to fulfill your higher need. That is true education. So Swami Vivekananda, in his beautiful small booklet which he published on Sri Ramakrishna and Hinduism, that is the name of the book he published. It is a very small booklet, but it's very important to understand the message of Sri Ramakrishna. What was his achievement? I mean, what did he come to achieve? He was born, as you all know, it's a coincidence that he was born in the same year when the British Parliament enacted, in 1836, when the Macaulay's Act was introduced to systematically replace the ancient system of education with a new system of education, which would enable them to consolidate their power over the enslaved nation. Because the moment people start thinking themselves, there will be rebellion. The people would want to go back to their civilizational roots. Every country, every nation, every ethnicity, they somehow find it difficult to give up their old roots, because that which defined them as a civilization, nobody wants to lose. They may acquire other things. Indian system was designed in such a way that there is a verse in the Rig Veda which says, let noble thoughts come from all sides. Let noble thoughts come from all sides. They were not uh, allergic to taking good thoughts from other nations, other countries. But unfortunately, the Indians themselves became exclusive. They gave up their true inclusive nature, which was a characteristic of the Vedas, where the Vedic rishis believed that knowledge is not the monopoly of one religion or one ethnicity or one nation. Everybody contributes something or the other to society, and each one has its own value, own significance. But we have to take that education which fulfills all our needs. Our physical needs are also to be fulfilled. Our health needs are to be fulfilled. Our mental needs are to be fulfilled, emotional needs. But what about the spiritual needs? So complete education is what Swami Vivekananda said was the goal of Sri Ramakrishna. And he deliberately, then why did he come as a illiterate person? Why did he discard? Not that he could not go to school. He discarded all external forms of learning to serve one purpose. According to Swami Vivekananda, he refused to go to school, or he refused to undergo a imported type of education, because he wanted to show that education is based on life's experiences. That is what Swamiji said, that to show how the Vedic rishis, in the purified mind, when you practice core spirituality, real spirituality, not just religious dogmas and which are taught to us by priests. Hinduism also had their own priests, where they diluted all the great ideas of Vedas and the Upanishads. But in Sri Ramakrishna, he said, came to revalidate the core ideas of Vedas. That is why he is known as Vedamurti, the embodiment of Vedas. Why? Because Vedas are based on direct spiritual experience. They are not acquired through scholarship. You don't need an academic degree to understand to experience the truths of the Vedas. Whether you are literate or illiterate, if the core values, in fact, some of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples never went to school. At least he could read and write his own name. But there was one disciple whose name was Swami Adbhutananda, who could not even write a single alphabet. So Swami Vivekananda says that Sri Ramakrishna came to demonstrate before the world that religion is not a matter of academic study. In fact, it has nothing to do with formal learning. It is the direct experience of truth. And for that, you require a technique which will make you less gross, less worldly. As Jesus said, you can't have God and mammon at the same time. What did he mean? He says, my kingdom of God is the kingdom of the spirit. It's not of the world. That is unfortunately what Romans failed to understand. They thought Jesus has ambition to become a king. And they asked him, do you consider yourself to be a king? He said, yes, I am a king of the spiritual world. How were they to understand these things? They only knew of conquering people, having big armies. So they had to crucify him. So also all the Vedic rishis, they were considered to be given more respect than the kings. The highest king, the Emperor Ashoka, who ruled over a vast continent, even he fell down. I mean, he surrendered himself to the great ideas of Buddha, and he gave up this whole kingdom. He renounced, I mean, he gave up all the killing and other things, because he found there is a greater life in the spirit. To establish the dominance of spirit in our material world is what prophets do. So the kingdom of heaven was the kingdom of the spirit, and God is spirit and should be worshipped as spirit, not as matter. That is what all the prophets say, including Jesus. So all the other prophets, everybody who came, they came to show that the world of spirit is infinitely powerful than and subtle. The subtler you are, the more power you have, the more happy you are, the less fearful you are. So it is only our identification, that education which helps us to identify ourselves with the spirit, with the pure spirit. That's the real goal of true education. That education Sri Ramakrishna had. In fact, his teacher or his university was Mother Nature. As Swami Vivekananda said, he had any problem, he wanted to know anything, he went to the Divine Mother. People thought he was mad. What is all this? But that is how all the great prophets lived. Their understanding or experience of religion came through intuition, not through academic learning. We are just parroting other people's ideas and getting academic degrees. That will never give us a taste of true spirituality. That is why the first point which Swami Vivekananda makes in this small, you may say, a small biography of Sri Ramakrishna, very small. It is where he didn't write a biography. It was written by Swami Sardhananji later on, who elaborated on the small booklet. Because Sardhananji felt the core ideas were given by Swami Vivekananda in his booklet about his master. What did he come, what was the purpose of his incarnation, and why did he come? What did he want to achieve, or what was his message, his life and message? That is what we are trying to discuss on this day in the light of Swami Vivekananda's small booklet. So he said one of the first purposes was Sri Ramakrishna's being born, refusing to be educated, refusing all kinds of formal learning, to show that spiritual experiences is not the monopoly of learned people, the academically learned people. True wisdom is not the monopoly of everything, of the academic learning. So true wisdom can come out of a deep yearning or a desire to learn, know directly the truth from the source of truth, that is God. If we say God is Sat, his truth himself. If we define God as Sat, Chit, pure knowledge is Chit, pure existence is Sat, and pure joy or pure bliss is Ananda. So if we describe Sat, Chit, Ananda, the source of Satchidananda is God, then is not trying to realize that, experience that God, the highest form of religion. Other education, other lower education will give us limited Sat, limited existence. It is there, wealth is there today, but only until you live. After you die, you have to you leave behind everything. Nothing follows you after death. That is what the Vedas say. The only thing that follows you after death are your good deeds. Because this transmigration, which Buddhists and most of the religions believe in, that transmigration depends on your actions. The present causes will give rise to effect. That is known as karma. So Sri Ramakrishna knew, or Sri Ramakrishna came, according to Swamiji, to give us to show us what true spiritual experience is, what true spirituality is, and that it does not depend on academic learning. So he deliberately discarded and showed that these great truths of religion are spontaneously revealed in the minds of the ancient rishis, whether they were learned, or okay, whether they were learned in the secular sense or not. It did not depend on that. So that is the first thing. What is the second thing he came to achieve? Second thing, according to Swamiji, that when Sri Ramakrishna was born, India was a hotbed of religious conflicts. I'm not talking of inter-religious conflict. Within Hinduism, there were conflicts. Just as now you have Protestants, Roman Catholics, and so many different sects. So also Hinduism had, in fact, more number of sects, more diversity. There were Shaivites, there were Vaishnavites. Everybody was quarreling because of wrong understanding of spirituality. They had not understood what the founder fathers of the sect wanted to achieve. The religious teaching diluted to such an extent that religion caused more trouble, more conflict than solving the problems. That is what we observe in the world now. Religion is supposed to make a man or a human being a better human being. But instead of that, in the name of religion, if you quarrel, then the purpose of religion is not served. So Sri Ramakrishna, according to Swami Vivekananda, that was the second big thing he came to do. His main message was that any path, if followed, if one is sincere, if really one wants to know the truth, all the paths lead to the same goal, the same truth. Truth cannot be two. Truth has to be one. Ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. That is what the Vedas say. Truth is one, but sages tell that truth in different ways. Depending on the age, depending on the understanding of people, this truth is expressed in different ways. But truth cannot be two. Truth has to be one. So ekam sad, there is only one truth, and that is expressed in different ways. So this idea of unity in diversity, to unify all the sects within Hinduism and also the religions that have come from outside of India, at least in the Indian subcontinent. There were so many foreign ideas, religious ideas, so many religious influences, and that added to more confusion, because everybody said my religion is right. And naturally, in that, Swami Vivekananda uses the word conflagration. It was a big fire. A big fire in the name of religion was burning. So Sri Ramakrishna's life, if you read the gospel, if you read the great master, was to douse this fire. That fire which was burning the hearts of humanity. Tavak kathamrutam tapta jivanam. When we chanted the mantra in the beginning, which is chanted every day before reading the gospel, what does it mean? God's words, gospel. That is how the gospel word has come. Whether you talk of the Christian gospel, the four gospels according to Luke, St. John and others, or whether you refer to any core religious teaching by any prophet anywhere in the world, that kathamrutam means the immortal words of spirituality, the spiritual core of every religion. Tapta jivanam means a life which is burned, scorched in this world, not knowing where to go. There are so many sorrows, so many problems that humankind faces. He solves one problem, there's another problem there. He douses one fire, another fire is started. In the name of religion, in the name of economics, in the name of politics, we have these quarrels, these fires, literally. So tapta jivanam, a heart which is burned on these fires, to cool it down, Sri Ramakrishna came. So Swami Vivekananda says the second mission, or the second thing which Sri Ramakrishna came to do, is to douse these fires, this mutual hatred due to exclusiveness, everybody saying my path is the only path. So he came to show everybody that every path is valid path to reach God. That was his second message. That diversity will be there. No two human beings, no two thumbs are same. The thumb impression, if you take, every human being has a unique thumb impression. So every diversity is the very, very fact or very nature, or it's the reality in nature. Nature was meant to create diversity. But then why this? As long as nature, if we go to the gross universe, there will be diversity. Even two brothers are not like each other, though, even though they may be twins. So then where do we find the unity? If there is no diversity, if there is no, there is only diversity, then how do we get that unity? So unity cannot be had at the gross level. Unity is only at the level of the spirit. As the pure spirit, as the pure Satchidananda, we are all one. That was the discovery, or that was the realization Sri Ramakrishna gave. So what does that mean? Should you give up diversity? Swami Vivekananda, explaining his master's words, spoke in the Parliament of and after subsequently he gave a lot of talks in America and also in London and England. So Swami Vivekananda said that does Sri Ramakrishna's message say that a Hindu has to become a Muslim, or a Muslim has to become a Buddhist, or a Buddhist has? No, he says, God forbid. A Hindu has to become a better Hindu. A Christian has to become a better Christian. So Sri Ramakrishna's second message, important, was you be what you are, but be the best in. If you are a Christian, become a very good Christian. So it is very strange that all the different sects within Hinduism, everybody came to Sri Ramakrishna. They thought he belonged to their sect. Even there was a Christian disciple who said, I see Christ in you. So many people who read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, they have confessed, or many, even belonging to other religions and other sects of Hinduism, they felt that after reading the Gospel, after understanding it in the light of Sri Ramakrishna's life, we found the real truths of our own religion, our own faith, which were hidden, so far hidden. We were not aware of these great truths. But Sri Ramakrishna made us understand what our religion really tells us, what is the core of our own religion. So he came to unify, to have a unity at a deeper and fundamental level. At the external level, he said it is futile to think that the rituals or the methods of Hindus will match that of Islam or any other religion in the world. Everybody has its own unique identity. That diversity not only has to remain, it will remain. You can't have the same coat for all the children in the family. Everybody has a different sized coat, depending on his height, weight, and all those things. So the only unity that is possible is at a deeper fundamental level of the spirit. That is the second message of the life and teachings of Sri Ramakrishna in this small booklet. And the third is very important, and I'll conclude. What was his third message? Important. There are many wonderful truths in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. What was the third message? Historically speaking, if you trace the history of mankind, except maybe in the Vedic ages, at least in India, there was a lot of gender disparity. Somehow, history shows that the male has always dominated the planet. Whichever culture, whichever part of the world you go, it is an eternal problem. Though so many political, economic, social movements have been started where people are fighting for their fundamental rights, not just the rights of different ethnicities, but also the gender inequality. It is a very big issue now all over the world. So Swami Vivekananda said, he came to restore the respect that was given to Shakti. Shakti is the feminine aspect of reality. According to Hinduism, or according to all the Indian philosophies, the feminine aspect, the creative aspect of nature is known as Shakti. And the male aspect, the Purusha aspect is known as Shiva, or it is known as Purusha, or it is known as Brahma. Not Brahman is neutral. In fact, they say that Brahman cannot be only in Prakriti. You will find this gender diversity in gender. In Brahman, there is no, everything is one uniform consciousness. There is no question of male or female there. So Brahman as a reality is genderless, but once Prakriti, once you come to this world, once you accept the world, which we have to do, we have to live in this world, there this discrepancy between the men and women, between the Shakti and the male aspect of creation in a created world, that difference could be removed only at the highest level. When it comes to, when one person spiritually grows, then these gender inequalities fall apart. So to restore that, he says, Swami Vivekananda says, Sri Ramakrishna came in this incarnation giving more importance to his spiritual consort Sri Ma Sharda Devi. She lived for 34 years. If you see the history of all the other incarnations, the male counterparts survived their women counterparts. They lived much longer. You take Buddha and his wife, or you take all the other incarnations which are Rama and Krishna and all those people, if you take, they outlived or survived their feminine consort, the spiritual consorts. And their message was more important than that of the Shakti, that of their spiritual consort, the feminine spiritual consort. But in this incarnation, Sri Ramakrishna came to reverse the trend. And Swami Vivekananda says, the Divine Mother, whose Gospel of Holy Mother we discuss every Saturday and Tuesday. Tuesday we discuss the divine play of Sri Ma Sharda Devi. In fact, he said, I have done very little, you have to do much more. So the respect, the raising of women to the level of giving them, trying to emphasize the motherhood of God. We call God the Father in heaven. But Swamiji says, the motherhood of God was raised to such a high pedestal. Why can't, if in the Prakriti, in Brahman, there is no father, no mother. The gender inequality comes only when there is Prakriti or creation. According to Sankhya philosophy, the Purusha is neutral. He is pure consciousness. Gender comes only when there is a creation. But he said, in this created world, in the world of Maya, where somehow the feminine counterpart of all the big religious leaders, they were relegated to a lower place. You can't expect, in most of the sects, women to be the spiritual head of some group. You will always find that men dominate the women, even in matters of religion. Of course, in companies and big industries now, even politics, you will find women at the top. But it will take a lot of time to have women as the spiritual masters, or having the same, placed on the same footing as men. So, Swami Vivekananda said he came to demonstrate the motherhood of God, and he did it in a way, leaving behind his spiritual consort Sri Ma Sharda Devi, who lived for 34 years more than him and showed the world what real women's empowerment is. What do you mean by women's empowerment? Is it political empowerment? Oh, we have a lot of prime ministers who are politically stronger than their male counterparts. We have great scientists, we have great industrial CEOs, administrators. But that is in the lower field. What about spirituality? Do we assign them? Or why even the concept of Godhead? Why can't God be the mother? Why can't God be worshipped as the mother? Why not? Of course, India did it for centuries. They worshipped God both as the father or the mother. Though there are some places where God is worshipped as the mother, the Madonna, the Mother Virgin Mary, and they are all worshipped. But normally it is a male dominated. Even Godhood, if you see, is so to remove that disparity, to remove that gender inequality is the third great role Sri Ramakrishna played. And if we observe his life, the role Holy Mother had to play in consolidating the order, the role she played in the spiritual ministration of a large number of followers or devotees. Sri Ramakrishna started it, but at the same time you will notice that she did much more for a bigger, longer period of time. And Swami Vivekananda himself, he might have argued with Sri Ramakrishna, might have disagreed with his own master. And he, in fact, himself says, I had to struggle a lot to accept his truth. But if you see, if you observe, there was not a single moment in life where Swami Vivekananda had any, defiance. Did he show any defiance or any, he was so full of reverence for the Holy Mother. Her word was the final word. He would argue, question his own master Sri Ramakrishna, but never. If you see, even before going to America, he sought permission. He wrote a letter. He said, I don't know, Sri Ramakrishna is asking me. He had a vision where Sri Ramakrishna was asking him to go towards the west. His disciples purchased a ticket and asked him to participate in the Parliament of Religions. So, but he was not very sure, though Sri Ramakrishna told him to go to the west. In those days, it was unimaginable, Indian going, because the whole Parliament of Religions was designed in such a way to show the superiority of certain religious traditions. So it was very difficult to go and have a voice there. The world was not so liberal in those days. So he was not aware whether he should go. If at all he went there, will he succeed? What can a single person do? Though he had confidence, he knew Sri Ramakrishna is asking me to go. But he said, I am not going till I get permission from Sri Ma Sharda Devi. If she tells me and blesses me and says, you go, then I will go. So he waited and waited. In those days, postal delays were very common. So he cancelled his ticket, in fact, his ship ticket. He said, I am not going to go. I want a clear indication from the divine, from Sri Ma Sharda Devi, whom he respected more than even his own guru. So he said, if she blesses me and if she agrees to this trip, then I'll go. The moment he got that letter, it came, ultimately that letter came, and she blessed him profusely, say, you go, it is Thakur's wish, you will succeed. So, Sri Ramakrishna's wish, you will succeed. After he got that letter, immediately he told his disciples, now you can buy the ticket, I'll go. He was not sure what he will go to Chicago and speak before the best leaders, religious and spiritual leaders of the world. He was not even sponsored by anybody from Hinduism. Hinduism had their own sponsors. Buddhism, all religions had sent their representatives. He just went, having faith in the Divine Mother, in the Holy Mother. He said, if Mother has blessed me, something will work out. And you know the rest was history. How he became the most prominent speaker or the prominent leader of the Parliament of Religions, as if the whole Parliament of Religions was staged to spread this wonderful universal message of unity in diversity. For the first time, on a world stage, somebody went and said that all religions are true, they lead to the same goal, echoing the Bhagavad Gita, the verse of Bhagavad Gita, which says, just as the different streams, which he quoted in the first talk in the Parliament of Religions, just as all the different streams and the rivers ultimately go and merge in the ocean, so also, O God, following diverse paths, ultimately they all pour themselves into the ocean. So this was the third important message. And of course, the message of renunciation, which Holy Mother said was a greater message than all these messages. The idea that which Jesus said in his own way, that you cannot have God and mammon at the same time. So Sri Ramakrishna showed before the world that without renunciation, one does not need learning. One needs purity of approach, purity of life, the detachment that one has to have towards the things which are gross. If you want higher things, you have to slowly, may not be able to give up, and it is not also possible to give up everything. But if your discrimination, sense of discrimination is there, then we will reach the goal. You can't have both the east and the west. You can't be going to the west at the same time approaching the east. You have to choose one. Though it may be gradual, nobody tells you just give up the world. But to show that path, that's why Srima Sharda Devi once said that the greatest message of Sri Ramakrishna is his natural renunciation. Of course, even all the prophets, if you see all the great religious leaders, they were men of tremendous renunciation. The great, if you see Saint Francis of Assisi, belonged to a very rich family. And even Jesus said, sell everything that thou hast and then follow me. So also you find all the great spiritual, the saint, if you go to Assisi, if you read the life of Saint Francis, you'll understand what kind of, then you have this brother Lawrence and so many saints in various sects of Hinduism who saved the religion, the core of religion. I'm not saying they preached religion as any priest would do. They saved the core of religion. So that through their superhuman renunciation, to show that the spirit always triumphs, not the matter is powerless before the power of the spirit. So that is what he came to demonstrate. So I'll take your leave. If there are a few minutes, I'll just see if there are some questions in the chat box. I'm sorry we had to delay a little bit, though I had written it would begin at 6:30, but we were going to have some few songs, but we could not organize it. Our afternoon program was delayed. So I had to have some gap in between. So I'm very happy that we had some wonderful talks in the afternoon. We will be sharing it on YouTube as well. It was there on YouTube live, but still we will share that link. Those of you who have missed those two wonderful talks by Swami Satyeshananda and Swami Muktidanandji in the afternoon, and the wonderful question answers. There were some nice questions and answers, question answer session after the talks. So everything will be shared, and I once again pray to Sri Ramakrishna to make our lives blissful and meaningful. If we follow the wonderful life and message, it will allow us to live in harmony and peace, not only with others, but also within ourselves. Our own minds sometimes cause more peacelessness than the external factors. So we have to have that peace, exterior peace, external peace and internal peace. So the wonderful gospel and the life of Sri Ramakrishna helps us to live lives of fulfillment. And I prayed at his holy feet, at the feet of the Holy Trinity, so that they may give us the wisdom and the strength to practice their teachings. Yes. So there's one question somebody has asked. Yeah, there is one question. It is a simple question. It says that did Sri Ramakrishna speak any other Indian languages apart from Bengali? He speaks the language of the spirit. You don't reduce Sri Ramakrishna to a Bengali or a Christian he is far great than not only language, not only a state, not only a country. He was a universal person. So it would be right for us to say that Sri Ramakrishna spoke the language of the spirit. The language which he spoke, the external language, it's something trivial, because the same truth, as he said, he himself said, many people used to come, they did not even have to ask a question. There were so many people, the Biharis, the Punjabis, and who used to live in Calcutta, they used to come. He didn't require them to ask questions. He could read their minds, as he himself said. I can see the thoughts of others as I see objects inside a glass cupboard. So for him, language was something very superficial. So even if he did not speak any other language, there is an incident where Swami Sarvasthananda says he used to look at birds and say what they are talking to what are they communicating with each other. So if he can understand the language of the birds, so what is so great? But for all practical purposes, because he was born in Bengal, he communicated mostly in Bengali, though he used some other words sometimes. And when scriptures were taught to him, when Sanskrit was discussed in front of him, even if he did not know the language, he knew the essence of that. That is the greatness. These people don't depend on verbal expression for understanding. Their knowledge comes from a far higher source, deeper source than language. So then one more thing, I did not know that the Hindus already had their own representative at the Chicago Parliament of Religions. Where might I read? Though one representative of Hinduism was Swami Vivekananda's own friend. He belonged to Nadiad in Gujarat. But unfortunately, because he was sick, he could not go, and his paper was read out by somebody else. He represented Advait Vedanta. Manilal Nabhubai Dwivedi, he was one. Then there was Pratap Chandra Mazumdar, who was also Swamiji's friend, who was an official representative of Brahmo Samaj, which is also a Hindu sect. And there were others. There were Jains and other people who represented. So if you see, it is there in his biography, the people who Narsimhacharya was also there, who was one of the representatives of some sect of Hinduism. So there were many, many representatives, but they were overshadowed by Swami Vivekananda, because he, as Sister Nivedita said, when he spoke about Hinduism, it was about the religious ideas of the Hindus. But after he finished his speech, Hinduism was created. That is what Sister Nivedita, Margaret Noble, he said when he started speaking, it was about Hindu ideas. But when he finished, he gave such a comprehensive vision of the core values of Hinduism, which no Hindu or no sectarian Hindu would ever do. So definitely there were many people, and if you see, you will get this idea. Now there's another question which Barid is asking. Could you please explain again the effects of silence on our spiritual life? What Muktidanandji told. Yes, today he spoke about the silence, the true silence of the mind. You see, it's not the physical silence. If true silence, spiritual silence means when your mind is silenced. People are there who practice mauna, it is known as mauna. Some people, they decide that I should not speak, waste my energy, but their minds are full of very highly active. So that silence is very dangerous. It will shatter the person, because at least if he speaks, he will release the pent up energy in the brain. Otherwise, the brain gets affected. So, the silence which Muktidanji spoke of, he mentioned this, but that silence is not the physical silence. Of course, you experience that when he, as he said, when you go to the Himalayas, when you come face to face, that silent place where there is absolutely no sound and the vast glory of the ice peaks, you just confront them. Then, even a very restless mind also has a tendency to become silent. But unless one is prepared, if one goes with a very, very restless and worldly mind, even there, even if there is no physical noise, his mind will make noises and it will trouble him. So, it was not just physical silence he meant mental silence. Yeah, so I think the questions are, there are no more questions. I'll take your leave. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.